She grew up in a small town where the days were quiet and dreams felt far away. The streets were narrow and life was simple. Most people there worked hard just to survive, and nobody really talked about chasing big dreams. But for her, music was more than just sound. It was a feeling that helped her breathe when life felt heavy. She didn't come from a rich family. Her father worked long hours fixing things in a small workshop, and her mother sold vegetables in the local market. They didn't have much, but there was always music in their little home. Her father used to play an old guitar that had lost some of its shine, but whenever he played it, the whole room came alive. After he passed away, that same guitar became her most precious thing in the world. She started playing it every evening, sitting by the window and strumming softly as the sun went down. The sound wasn't perfect. Sometimes the strings made rough noises and her voice would crack. But she didn't mind. She sang because it made her feel close to her father, and because every song helped her forget her worries for a while. The neighbors would often hear her singing and stop outside to listen. They would smile and say, "You have such a lovely voice. You should sing on a big stage someday." She would laugh shyly and say, "Maybe one day." Deep inside, she wanted that more than anything. But life didn't make it easy. After finishing school, she had to start working at a small cafe to support her mother. Her mornings began early and her nights ended late. The cafe paid very little, but she never complained. Even after the longest days, she would come home, make herself some tea, and pick up her guitar. Her fingers were often sore, but she kept practicing. She believed that one day, if she kept trying, someone out there would listen. There were times she sent her recordings to small studios in nearby cities, hoping they'd call her. But weeks passed and nobody replied. A few people told her that she didn't have the look for the music world. They said her style was too plain, her songs too emotional. Some even laughed at her for dreaming too big. She stopped sharing her dreams for a while, but she never stopped singing. Every song she wrote came from her real experiences. The struggles, the loneliness, the hope that refused to die inside her heart. One evening, as she was cleaning tables at the cafe, a group of college students came in. They were talking excitedly about a big national music competition happening in the city. She heard them say it was open to everyone. No background, no fees, just pure talent. Her heart started beating faster. She waited until they left, then quietly searched for the competition on her phone. The website said it was a chance for anyone to perform live in front of judges, producers, and a huge audience. The grand prize was big, but that wasn't what caught her attention. What caught her was a single line written on the poster: "One song can change your life." That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about it again and again. What if I try? What if this is my chance? Then another thought came. What if I fail? For hours, she sat by the window, staring at the stars, torn between fear and hope. Finally, she whispered to herself, "I'll never know unless I try." The next morning, she registered for the competition. Her hands shook as she filled out the form, but once she pressed submit, she felt lighter. Over the next few weeks, she practiced harder than ever. She picked her best song, one she had written for her father years ago. The lyrics were simple, but they carried her heart. She practiced until her fingers ached and her voice turned hoarse. Sometimes she would perform in front of the mirror, imagining the lights and the audience. Other times she would close her eyes and picture her father watching proudly. The day of the competition arrived. She took the earliest bus to the city. It was her first time going to such a big place, and everything felt new. The tall buildings, the noise, the crowd. When she reached the venue, her heart almost stopped. It was huge. Bright banners, television cameras, and people dressed in shining clothes filled the space. She walked in quietly, holding her guitar close like a friend. She saw other contestants, confident, stylish, and surrounded by their teams. Some had makeup artists fixing their looks. Others practiced with sound engineers. She felt small among them, but tried to remind herself why she was there. "I came to sing, not to impress," she whispered under her breath. As she waited backstage, she heard whispers about the judges. One name came up again and again, a famous critic known for his harsh words. People said he enjoyed making contestants nervous and embarrassing them. "He can destroy your confidence with just one sentence," someone said. She tried to ignore it, but her stomach tightened. Finally, her name was called. Her legs felt weak as she walked toward the stage. The lights were bright and she could barely see the faces in the crowd. She stood there holding her guitar, her palms sweaty. The critic looked up at her and gave a half smile, the kind that didn't look kind at all. "So," he said into the microphone, "another dreamer from a small town?" The audience chuckled. She stayed quiet. He leaned back and said, "Let's hope this one can sing better than the last." The laughter grew louder. Her face burned, but she didn't respond. She just adjusted the mic and took a deep breath. Her fingers touched the strings, familiar, warm, safe. The first chord rang softly, and for a moment the noise of the crowd faded away. She started singing. The first few notes were shaky, her voice trembling with nerves. But as the song went on, she forgot about the critic, the audience, and the lights. She sang from the same place she always had, her heart. Her voice carried pain and love all mixed together. Every word told a story, of nights spent working, of dreams almost lost, of a promise she made to her father to never give up. The hall slowly grew silent. The critic stopped smirking. People leaned forward, drawn in by something real, something raw. When the song ended, there was a long pause. For a second, she thought maybe they hadn't liked it. But then someone started clapping. Another joined. Within moments, the whole hall erupted in applause. The sound was loud, powerful, full of emotion. She stood there frozen, tears filling her eyes. The critic said nothing. He simply looked down, his expression unreadable. She bowed slightly and walked off stage, her heart racing. Backstage, a few other contestants came up to her, their eyes wide. "You were amazing," one of them said. She just smiled softly, still shaking. That night, she didn't care whether she won or lost. She knew something had changed. For the first time in her life, she had sung in front of hundreds of people, and they had listened, truly listened. As she walked out of the hall into the cool night air, she felt free. The lights from the city reflected in her eyes, and she whispered to herself, "Maybe one song really can change everything." When she walked off the stage after her performance, her hands were still shaking. The loud sound of clapping and cheering was echoing in her ears. She had never experienced something like that in her entire life. For a few moments, she couldn't even believe that it was real. People were standing, clapping, and some even had tears in their eyes. She had sung from her heart, and somehow her feelings had reached theirs. Backstage, she sat down quietly on a chair, still holding her old guitar. Her eyes were a little wet, not from sadness but from disbelief. She had gone on that stage expecting laughter and rejection, but what she got instead was love and respect. Other participants came to her and said kind words. Some told her that her song reminded them of their families, their struggles, and their own lost dreams. Hearing that made her realize that she had touched something deeper than just music. Still, a small voice inside her wondered what the critic thought. He hadn't said anything. He was known for giving cold, sometimes cruel comments to almost every contestant. But when she looked at him before leaving the stage, his expression had changed. The arrogant smile was gone. He had looked thoughtful, almost speechless. She didn't know if that meant she had impressed him or just surprised him. As the event continued, she stayed backstage watching other singers perform. Some were technically perfect on high notes, flawless rhythm, great presence. But even then, she could feel that her performance had something different. She hadn't sung to show skill. She had sung to tell her truth. When the show ended, the organizers gathered all contestants for the results. She stood quietly in the corner, not expecting anything. The host read out the names of the winners, and as expected, her name wasn't among them. She felt a small pinch of disappointment, but quickly smiled. She hadn't come for a trophy. She had come to be heard, and she had been. As she picked up her guitar and started to leave, a voice called out from behind. It was one of the show's coordinators. "Wait, the critic wants to speak to you," he said. Her heart skipped a beat. She turned around and saw the critic standing near the stage, talking to another judge. He looked serious. Slowly, she walked towards him, unsure of what was about to happen. When she reached him, he looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "That song," he said in a calm tone, "and where did it come from?" She hesitated, not knowing how to answer. "It came from my life," she said softly. "From everything I've been through." He nodded slowly. "I've been judging singers for years," he said. "People with perfect voices, perfect looks, and perfect training. But what you did tonight wasn't about perfection. It was about honesty." She didn't know what to say. The same man who had tried to humiliate her on stage was now speaking with respect. He continued, "When you started singing, I wanted to stop you. I thought it was going to be another cliché performance. But halfway through your song, I realized something. Your music wasn't trying to impress, it was trying to connect. And that's rare. For a few seconds, she just stood there silently. Then he said something that would stay with her forever. Don't ever stop singing. The world needs more voices that tell the truth. With that, he walked away. She stood there frozen, trying to process what had just happened. The same critic who had mocked her in front of everyone had now praised her with words she would never forget. When she finally left the hall that night, the city lights looked brighter than before. She walked to the bus stop with her guitar on her back, smiling softly to herself. She didn't win the competition, but she had won something far more valuable: respect and faith in her own voice. The bus ride home was long, but she didn't feel tired. She replayed everything in her mind: the laughter, the song, the applause, and the critic's words. When she reached home, her mother was waiting for her, sitting near the window. As soon as she walked in, her mother asked eagerly, "How did it go?" She smiled and said, "It went better than I ever imagined." Her mother looked at her face and saw the glow in her eyes. She didn't need details to know that something special had happened. They sat together and she told her everything: how the critic had tried to embarrass her, how the audience reacted, and what he said after her performance. Her mother listened silently, tears forming in her eyes. When she finished, her mother held her hand and whispered, "Your father would be proud." That night she lay on her bed but couldn't sleep. She kept hearing the clapping in her head. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly alive. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Her phone started buzzing repeatedly. She picked it up and saw dozens of messages from people she didn't even know. Someone had recorded her performance and uploaded it online. The video was spreading fast. People were sharing it, commenting about her voice, her emotions, and her story. Within hours, it had reached thousands of views. Some comments said, "I cried listening to her song," and others said, "This is what real music feels like." She sat there stunned, reading every word with tears rolling down her cheeks. She hadn't expected this. She just wanted to sing, not become famous. But fate had other plans. Over the next few days, local news channels started talking about her. Journalists came to the cafe where she worked, asking for interviews. At first, she felt shy, unsure of what to say. She didn't see herself as a celebrity. She was just someone who loved music. But when they asked her what message she wanted to give to others, she simply said, "Don't be afraid to be yourself. Sometimes your truth is the most powerful song." People connected with her humility. She didn't pretend to be someone she wasn't. Even when big offers started coming from music producers and talent shows, she remained grounded. She still played the same old guitar. She still wore her simple clothes. But her life had changed. She was no longer the girl who sang in her room hoping someone might listen. Now thousands of people were listening, and more than that, they were feeling her songs in their hearts. Meanwhile, the critic who once mocked her also wrote an article about her performance. In it, he admitted that he had misjudged her. He wrote, "Sometimes we critics forget that music is not just sound and it's emotion." That night, she reminded me of that truth. His article went viral too, and people started praising him for accepting his mistake. She read that article one evening while sitting at her window. She smiled to herself, not out of pride but gratitude. That one performance had not only changed her life, but had also changed how others looked at music and honesty. In the following months, she began performing in small concerts and community gatherings. People would come not just to listen, but to feel. Her songs weren't about fame or money. They were about real life, the kind everyone could relate to. Sometimes, before going on stage, she would still feel nervous. But then she'd remember that night, the lights, the silence, the tears, and the sound of the crowd cheering. That memory gave her strength every single time. She often thought about how close she had been to giving up. If she hadn't taken that one chance, she would still be singing to herself in her little room, never knowing what she was capable of. That thought reminded her that sometimes life changes in a single moment, a moment of courage. And though her journey had only just begun, one thing was clear: the girl who once feared rejection had now become a voice of hope for many. The critic had wanted to humiliate her, but instead her song made the whole world listen with open hearts. The days after her song went viral felt like a dream she never expected to live. Each morning when she woke up, there were more messages on her phone, more people sharing her performance, and more strangers sending kind words. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. People weren't praising her for being perfect. They were thanking her for being real. She still worked at the cafe for a few weeks after that night. Customers would come in and recognize her. Some would smile shyly and say, "You're the girl from that video, right? The one who made everyone cry?" She would blush and nod politely, but deep inside she felt a quiet happiness that was hard to describe. One afternoon, as she was wiping tables, her boss came over and handed her a small envelope. "You've got mail," he said with a teasing smile. Inside was a letter with a logo from a big music company. She carefully opened it. It was an invitation. They had seen her performance online and wanted to meet her to discuss a possible recording deal. For a long moment, she just stood there staring at the letter. It felt unreal. All those nights singing alone, all those moments of doubt. It suddenly made sense. Her voice, her pain, her honesty had finally found a place in the world. But she didn't rush into anything. She took a few days to think. She didn't want to lose herself in fame or forget why she started singing. She wanted to stay true to her music. So before meeting the company, she sat by her window again, with her old guitar in her lap, and whispered, "If this is my path, let it be one that keeps me real." When she went to the meeting, the people there were polite and professional. They praised her voice, her emotional performance, and her growing popularity. One of them said, "You could be a star if you just let us shape your image a little. Maybe change your look, get a new style, make your songs more commercial." She listened quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. She understood what they meant. They wanted her to fit into the market, to sound like everyone else. But that wasn't her. She wasn't here to look glamorous or follow trends. She was here to tell stories through her songs, stories that came from real life. With a gentle smile, she said, "I'm grateful for your offer, but I don't want to be changed. I just want to sing what's true to me." The room went silent. Some of them looked surprised, maybe even disappointed, but she didn't waver. She left the meeting with her head held high, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. That night she played her guitar again, not for fame or views, but just to remind herself of why she started. And as she sang, she felt her father's presence again, that quiet comfort that always gave her strength. A few days later, something unexpected happened. The critic, the same man who had once mocked her on stage, reached out. He called her personally and said he wanted to meet for an interview. She hesitated at first, unsure of his intentions, but finally agreed. They met at a quiet music studio. He greeted her politely this time, no arrogance, no sharp tone. He looked different, calmer, more thoughtful. "You changed something in me that night," he said as they sat down. "I've judged hundreds of artists, but I've never seen a performance like yours. It reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place." She smiled softly. "I just sang what I felt," she said. He nodded. "That's exactly what made it powerful. I want to feature your story. People should know where that song came from." The interview wasn't about fame or gossip. It was honest and emotional. She talked about her childhood, her struggles, her father's old guitar, and how she almost didn't join the competition. When the interview was published, it reached even more people. Readers wrote comments saying her story gave them courage to follow their own dreams. Soon, invitations started coming in from schools, events, and small concerts. They didn't offer much money, but she went anyway. She loved singing for people, especially those who needed hope. She performed at charity events, hospitals, and local community centers. Everywhere she went, people connected with her sincerity. One evening, she was invited to perform at a large cultural festival in another city. It was one of the biggest crowds she had ever faced. The lights were bright and the air was filled with excitement. Before going on stage, she stood backstage, holding her guitar and breathing deeply. She looked at the audience. Thousands of faces waiting for her. For a moment, fear crept in. What if they didn't like her songs? What if the magic from that competition night couldn't be repeated? But then she reminded herself. She wasn't here to impress, she was here to express. When she stepped on stage, the audience greeted her with cheers. She smiled humbly and said, "This song is for anyone who's ever felt small, forgotten, or afraid to dream." Then she began to sing. The first note was gentle, like a whisper. Then her voice grew stronger, filling the space with warmth and emotion. The crowd went silent, listening to every word. It was a new song she had written, about courage, about finding light in the darkest places. As she sang, the crowd slowly began waving their hands, some even closing their eyes. By the end of the song, the entire hall was filled with applause. Some people were crying. It was the same feeling as before, that unspoken connection between her heart and theirs. After the performance, she went backstage and sat quietly for a while, just taking it all in. One of the organizers came to her and said, "You didn't just perform tonight, you touched souls." She smiled, looking down at her old guitar. It was still scratched, still worn, but she wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. It was a part of her story, a reminder of where she came from. Later that night, as she traveled back home, she looked out of the bus window. The city lights passed by like falling stars. She thought about everything: the critic, the competition, the applause, and how far she had come. It hadn't been an easy road, but every struggle had shaped her into who she was now. She reached home late, and her mother was waiting at the door, just like always. They sat together in the quiet kitchen, drinking tea. Her mother smiled and said, "The whole town is talking about you again." She laughed softly and said, "I hope they're saying good things." Her mother nodded. "They are. But I'm proud of you, not because they talk about you. I'm proud because you stayed the same." Those words meant more to her than any award. Because deep down she knew her journey wasn't about fame or attention. It was about staying true to her heart no matter how far she went. That night she picked up her guitar once again and started humming a new tune. It was soft, full of hope. The world outside was sleeping, but her heart was wide awake. Somewhere in the distance she could still hear the echo of the crowd cheering, the sound of clapping blending with the rhythm of her music. And she smiled, knowing that her story was only just beginning. Not as a star created by fame, but as a voice born from truth and love. She closed her eyes and whispered softly, "Music found me when no one else did. And I'll keep singing, for those who still need to believe." The next few months brought changes that she never imagined. Her name began to appear in music magazines and online articles. Small music studios started inviting her to collaborate, and local TV channels wanted her to perform live. Every day seemed to open a new door, and yet she tried to stay calm and grounded. She still lived in the same small apartment, still made tea for her mother in the mornings, and still played her old guitar by the window every night. But there was one thing different: she now had confidence. She no longer sang to prove herself to anyone. She sang because she had something to say, and people were finally listening. One morning, she received an unexpected call from an international music festival. The organizer said her story had touched many hearts, and they wanted her to represent her country at a global stage. It was hard to believe. A young woman who once sang in small cafes was now being invited to perform among the best musicians in the world. Her hands trembled as she ended the call. She sat silently for a while, looking at her guitar. This was the biggest opportunity of her life. But it also brought pressure. The thought of performing in front of thousands of people from different countries made her anxious. She spent days preparing for the performance. She practiced her songs again and again, making sure every note came straight from her heart. Her mother often found her late at night, still playing softly, lost in the music. "You should rest," her mother would say, but she would just smile. "I'll rest after the song is ready." When the day finally arrived, she boarded a flight for the first time in her life. Looking out of the airplane window, she couldn't stop smiling. The clouds below looked like waves of dreams she had once thought were impossible. When she reached the festival city, everything felt new. The lights, the people, the energy. She was surrounded by talented singers, musicians, and artists from all over the world. Everyone seemed confident and experienced, but she stayed quiet, humble, and focused. She wasn't there to compete. She was there to share her heart. The night of the performance came faster than she expected. The huge stage was decorated with lights and banners. The sound of thousands of people filled the air. Backstage, she could feel her heartbeat racing. Her palms were sweaty, her throat dry. She whispered to herself, "Just be honest. That's enough." When her name was announced, she stepped onto the stage slowly. The spotlight hit her face, and for a moment, everything went quiet. She could barely see the audience, just a sea of lights and shadows. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and began to play her guitar. Her song was not about fame or victory. It was about struggle, loss, and the courage to keep going. Her voice trembled at first, but soon it grew stronger. Every note carried emotion, every word carried truth. The crowd listened in silence, not the silence of boredom, but of connection. Some people held hands, others wiped tears from their eyes. By the end of the song, the hall erupted in applause that seemed to go on forever. She opened her eyes, stunned. For a few seconds, she just stood there, unable to move. Then she smiled, bowed deeply, and walked off the stage. Backstage, some of the other performers hugged her. One of them said, "Your song. It didn't just touch us. It healed us." Those words made her eyes fill with tears. She had done what she came to do. The next morning, the internet was flooded with her performance. News outlets called her the soul singer from nowhere. People from around the world sent her messages, mothers, students, workers, saying her music gave them hope. She was offered recording contracts again, but this time she chose carefully. She decided to work with a small independent label that allowed her to stay authentic. Together they recorded her first album, filled with songs about life, love, and resilience. When the album was released, it didn't break records immediately, but it slowly grew in popularity. It was the kind of music people shared with friends during quiet nights or listened to when they needed comfort. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was real, and that's what made people love her. Months later, she was invited to perform on a major television show. Sitting across from the same critic who once mocked her, she smiled kindly. He looked at her with a humble expression now, no trace of the arrogance he once had. "I was wrong about you," he admitted on air. "I thought you were just another hopeful singer. But your music reminded me what true art feels like." She laughed softly and replied, "Music isn't about proving who's better. It's about sharing what's inside." The audience applauded and the moment went viral again, not because of conflict, but because of grace. She had turned humiliation into inspiration. Over time, her journey inspired many young people. She was invited to schools to talk about her story. She told the students, "You don't need to be perfect to be powerful. You just need to be honest. The world doesn't need another copy. It needs your truth." Her words stayed with them. Many students later said her talk gave them the courage to chase their dreams, not for fame, but for meaning. One winter evening, months after her album's success, she returned to the same small cafe where she used to work. The place hadn't changed much. The same warm lights, the same smell of coffee. She walked in quietly, holding her guitar. The owner looked up, surprised and emotional. "You came back," he said. She smiled and replied, "I wanted to sing one more time here, where it all began." That night, she performed a soft song for the few people sitting there. No cameras, no stage lights, and just her guitar, and a few listeners. As she sang, a gentle peace filled the air. She realized that no matter how far she went, she would always belong to the music and to the people who believed in her. After finishing the song, there was a deep silence. Then, slowly, the small crowd clapped. Not loudly, but sincerely. She smiled and whispered, "Thank you." When she walked home that night, snow began to fall. The streets were quiet and the world felt calm. She looked up at the sky and said softly, "I made it. Papa." She knew her father would have been proud, not because she became famous, but because she stayed true. The critic who once tried to humiliate her now wrote articles praising her honesty. Music lovers across the world spoke of her not as a celebrity, but as an artist who made people feel seen and understood. Her journey wasn't about rising to the top. It was about lifting others along the way. And that was what made her story unforgettable. As the years went on, she kept creating music. Not every song became a hit, but every song had a soul. She never stopped performing in small places, because she said, music doesn't need a big stage. It just needs open hearts. People continued to follow her journey, and her name became a symbol of grace, courage, and truth. And even though she became a well-known artist, she still lived simply, still helped others, and still played that same old guitar. Because that was her reminder that even the smallest voice can touch the world when it sings with honesty. In the end, her music didn't just make the crowd cheer, it made them believe again. Believe that no dream is too small, no heart too broken, and no voice too quiet to be heard. She didn't just sing songs, she sang life itself. And that was the melody that would never fade.